The RX 580 8GB model is one of the best bang for buck GPUs on the market right now, especially the secondhand market. But what kind of performance can you expect to get out of this card in mid-2020, and how much should you pay for one of these cards? All those answers coming up next. Hey guys, welcome back to Tech 215. I'm your host Nick, and today's video is going to be all about the RX 580 8GB model. And I'm here to tell you guys that if you can find one of these, especially on the secondhand market, you can turn one of your old gaming PCs or your newest ultra budget build into an absolute 1080p gaming beast. AMD's Polaris GPUs have been nothing short of spectacular, especially on the secondhand market. You guys remember in my RX 570 video, I was able to scoop up one of those used back in January for 71 bucks off of eBay. Just absolute amazing price to performance. Well, today we topped that mark. I have today an RX 580 8GB, which I got on the secondhand market for 75 bucks. Just an absolute grand slam home run of a deal. I'm going to take a look under the hood and give you a full breakdown of the spec sheet of the RX 580. We're going to benchmark this card with some graphically demanding titles with my Ryzen 7 3800X, and we're going to be comparing it to other cards in the RX 580's weight class, like the GTX 1660, the newer AMD Radeon RX 5500 XT, and of course we're going to compare it to its younger brother, the RX 570 4GB model. I'll give you guys some really good tips when buying GPU secondhand so that you get the absolute most out of your GPU and they last the longest. And real quick guys, please remember to hit the subscribe button. I put videos out once a week, everything pertaining to PC budget tech. These videos take a lot of work, so if you got something out of it, please do me a favor, hit subscribe, ring the bell so you get notified the second I drop a video, and toss a like on it, share it on social media. Really appreciate it guys. Thanks in advance. Alright guys, we got a lot to cover in today's video, so let's first take a look under the hood to give you a full breakdown of the specs of the RX 580 8GB model. The RX 580 was released in April of 2017 for an MSRP of $229 and $209 for the 4GB model, along with its stripped down brother, the RX 570, for a not much less MSRP of $179 and $199. At the heart of the GPU sits the Polaris 20 graphics processor based on AMD's GCN 4.0 Global Foundries 14nm architecture. The die is a size of 232mm squared and also comes packed with 57 million transistors, same as the less powerful RX 570. However, what sets the 580 apart from the 570 is that it has all 2304 shading units unlocked, compared to the RX 570's cut down 2048. The 580 also holds the leading texture mapping units up from 128 to 144. It also has a higher base frequency of 1257 over the 570's 1168, a higher max turbo from 1244 all the way up to 1340, and has faster memory speeds going from 1750 MHz all the way up to 2000. The 580, like the 570, comes in 4 and 8 GB of GDDR5, and they both sit on a 256-bit memory bus. The rear I/O features 3 display ports and 1 HDMI, and this model comes with 1 DVI-D connector. In terms of power consumption, the RX 580 8GB model requires 1 8-pin adapter and has a TDP of 185 watts, compared to the RX 570 only needing 1 6-pin and has a much lower TDP of 120 watts. So now let's talk about pricing, and the RX 580 8GB model on sites like Newegg and Amazon are going for around $180 to $190. Other cards like the GTX 1660 can be found new for around $220, and I even saw a 1660 Super from EVGA for $230, which is even better. Meanwhile, the RX 5500 XT 4GB model can be found for around $190 to $200. I got mine at Micro Center brand new for $180. With the exception of the 570, all these cards run games at 1080p pretty much within a few frames and percentages of each other, as we're about to see in the benchmarks. However, the one major disadvantage the RX 580 has is that it's now 3 years old. And why would you want to buy a card that is 3 years old when you can save up just a little bit more and get something that is more power efficient and just as powerful, and in some cases actually more powerful? Well, to answer that question, we must first run the benchmarks. On our test bench today, we have the Ryzen 7 3800X set to its stock 3.9 GHz base. Cooling it is the Cooler Master ML240L AIO. For memory, we'll be using 32 GB of Trident Z Neo clocked at 3600 MHz. And I'm using an MP510 as my boot drive and a Samsung Evo 860 as my game drive. Okay, so first up we have Unigine Heaven, where the 580 scored a 2957 while averaging 117 FPS, smoking the 570 but falling behind the 1660 by 6.8% and was 8.5% slower than the newer 5500 XT. Moving on to 3D Mark's Firestrike, where the 580 had a good showing, beating the 570 out by only 8% and was neck and neck with the 5500 XT, winning by just a hair. But again, the 1660 takes the crown here with a score of 14,265, giving it a 12% lead over the RX 580. So now let's move on to some games, and first up we have Battlefield 5 at high settings, where the 580 once again had a very nice showing, just crushing the 570 here by 38%. It beat out the newer 5500 XT by 7 frames, and went toe-to-toe with the 1660, only losing by a single frame in this graphically demanding title from EA. Next up is Assassin's Creed Odyssey at high settings using the built-in benchmarking tool. The 580 once again had a solid performance, hitting 71 FPS and beating the RX 570 by 33%. It also beat out the 5500 XT by 5 frames, but couldn't quite keep up with the 1660, losing by a 12% margin. And finally, the classic GTA 5. This one was tested at Ultra, and the 580 and the 5500 XT were neck and neck here, only off by 1 frame. The 570 put up a respectable 89 FPS due to Rockstar's amazing GPU optimization, but the GTX 1660 ran away with this, scoring a 127 and winning by a pretty decent margin of 20%. Like I said, guys, this card is going to perform on par with the 5500 XT and the 1650 Super, but it's just a little bit less powerful than the 1660. This card is absolutely an amazing budget 1080p card, but I'll say it again in case you guys didn't hear me the first 10 times. The real value with the RX 580 and also the RX 570 is on the secondhand market. It just doesn't make sense to buy this card brand new when for the same price or with just a little bit more money saved, you can get something newer with a better architecture and that's more power efficient. The average sale price on eBay right now is $135. How I arrived at this number is I took the last 20 8GB RX 580s that were pre-owned and in working condition and came up with an average. Now guys, let's take a look at what I got my RX 580 8GB model for, $75. Now, you guys all aren't going to be able to find this card for that cheap, but I'm telling you, there are deals out there like it. If you guys watched my flipping PCs video, remember one of my rules was to find a good connect. That is how I got that RX 580 8GB model for that cheap, as I have a really good connect and a really good opportunity came up. But I'm telling you guys right now, if you look hard enough on sites like LetGo and Craigslist, you will be able to find really good deals that are just so good. They offer amazing price to performance, substantially better deals than buying the card brand new. So my best advice would be, if you're going to spend $160 to $180, then get one of the other cards I mentioned, because you'll be getting a brand new card with brand new architecture, longer driver support, and you're going to get the card throughout the entirety of its lifespan. The real value in the RX 580 is buying it on the second-hand market. Okay, so let me break it down to you guys this way. If you get the card for 80 bucks or less, that's an absolute grand slam home run of a deal for this card. Anywhere between 80 and 100 is still a really good deal on the RX 580, and anywhere between 100 and 120 is decent value for the RX 580, but I would say anywhere between 120 and 140 is just fair market value on the used market for the RX 580 8GB model. Alright guys, so that has been my in-depth look at the RX 580 and where it stands in mid-2020, and it's time for my final thoughts. But honestly, my final thoughts on this are pretty obvious. Buy the card used to get the best value. And as you guys can see from the cards we benchmarked, with the exception of the RX 570, the 580 8GB, the 5500 XT 4GB, and the GTX 1660, which is 6GB of VRAM. They all ran roughly around the same in most of the games we tested. I honestly think out of the group, the 1660 is probably the best card. So here is my advice. If you guys have, let's say, 150 bucks saved up for a graphics card, I would personally just hold off a little bit longer and save up that extra money. And I mean, for an extra 30 bucks, you can go out and get a brand new 5500 XT, which I would personally rather have over the 580. For starters, it performs just as good as a 580 8GB model. It is way better in terms of power consumption, and it's newer. It's 7 nanometers down from 14. Now, in terms of the 1660 and the 1660 Super, which we did not test, the 1660 Super, I saw that EVGA model, the single fan, it was only $230. And I know that's like, say, $80 more than the example I'm giving you guys, but that card is significantly better than the 580. And the one thing you need to consider is if you want to get into content creation, and if you're going to do heavy encoding or video editing, rendering, code compiling, the NVIDIA NVENC H.264 encoder is so much better. I cannot stress enough how much better it is. The other thing I want to talk about is if you guys don't feel comfortable buying a used card off a site like eBay or Craigslist because you're afraid it was a mining card or it's going to break, that is a realistic way of looking at it. Those things do happen. So when buying used, you do have to be careful. So if you're new to buying used graphics cards, maybe the first time, you want to use a site like eBay or pay the person using PayPal so you have the protection. But I always encourage you guys, whenever buying used hardware, especially graphics cards, always ask the seller, was the card a mining card? Will the card come with the original VBIOS? Because if you've never done it before, it can be a little tricky. I think most of you guys out there who watch these types of videos would be able to handle it. I know Tech Power Up has all the BIOSes basically for almost every single card out there, but if you do it wrong, just like updating your BIOS on your motherboard, you can brick your card. So be very careful. And also, take my advice, when you guys get a new card, change the thermal paste. Again, if you don't feel comfortable doing it, I understand, but it's a really easy process. CPU where you just put a pea-size amount and let the cooler do it. I prefer when doing the graphics card to actually spread it out and make sure it's perfectly covered, because those dies do get really hot. That's pretty much my advice. If you guys have, say, around 100 to 120 to spend on a new graphics card, do everything in your power to get the RX 580 8GB. Those deals are out there, guys. You do have to look really hard, but I'm telling you right now, you can find those deals. It just doesn't make sense to buy one of these cards brand new. But let me know what you guys think. Do any of you guys own the RX 580 8GB? What do you guys think of the RX 570 4GB still? How about the 1660, 1660 Super? Anybody got a 1650 Super? It's one card I've not yet tested on this channel. And what about the RX 5500 XT? I would love to know what you guys thought of today's video. And remember, please subscribe. Putting a like on this video helps the channel out so much. So if you guys can please remember, if you got something out of this video, please like it. And if you guys have any questions or concerns, remember, I look at every single comment. I reply to every single comment. If you guys have any questions, leave them in the description below, and I promise I will get back to you. Thank you so much for watching. I should be back in about a week with more tech content. Take care.